like to talk now about the Sea of Galilee boat that was discovered in 1987 on the Sea of Galilee near the city of Migdal, and also known as Magdala. The only image that we had of the Sea of Galilee boat, or a Sea of Galilee boat, was on a coin that was minted in the 2nd century AD. And it just has someone's foot on the bow of the ship. So we really didn't know what that looked like. And if you had taken a trip over to Israel, you may have gotten on a boat and they would have said, this is just like the type of Sea of Galilee boat that Jesus was on. Well, sometime later, in the 70s, across from the synagogue in a house, a villa, a floor was uncovered that had a mosaic. And I have a facsimile replica of that a woman named Becky Crandall made for me. And what it shows here is a ship with 2 masts. And if you look there are 2 oars on the side and then a rudder. And there would have been 2 rudders on each side and a total of 4 oars. And so that gave us a better picture of what the Sea of Galilee boats may have looked like in the 1st century. But then in 1987, there was a drought, and the sea levels of the Sea of Galilee got down to very low level, and 2 men went out riding upon the sand, and they discovered something, and they began to dig, and they thought, well, I think we found an old boat. So they notified the Israeli antiquity authorities, and then they went out and began to do some research. And a man named Shelley Washman, who I believe still is at the University of Texas at Austin now, and he was in charge of excavating that boat for the Israeli Antiquities Authority. What they discovered is, yes, indeed, they did find a very old boat, and it was made with mortise and tenon type of construction. And the way that works is there are no nails. It's used digging out part of this and putting in a slot and then putting a peg in. And then that would be built. And then when it was completed, it would be pushed out into the sea, and then the wood would swell and make it watertight. This is interesting because ancient boats were built using this method throughout the ancient period before Christ. If you recall, when Noah built the ark, he was told to take it and pitch it within and without. And they didn't make boats like that. Noah's ark is the only boat that really is mentioned that's like that. So that's kind of a footnote there. When this was recovered, it was discovered that it used 12 different types of wood. Mr. Washman brought in a colleague named Dick Steffi, and he at first thought the person that built the boat was not a very good boat builder. And then after he did some research, he found out the guy was a genius, and it shows how poor the people were, because the way the extra wood was laid in, it kept the boat afloat probably another 10 years or more longer than it was designed to be used for. And it was placed in just such a way, and it showed just how poor the people and how heavily taxed they were to try to use these scraps of wood to keep this boat afloat. He then reconstructed what the boat must have looked like. This boat that was discovered had 1 mast, and using his model, we have a model of his boat, and we see here that the boat is a shallow boat. It's almost built like it's almost the shape of a canoe on the bottom. And so it's not a real, it's not a real seaworthy type of a ship. And ballast bags would have had to have been used to keep that boat in a proper heading, depending on how you were sailing, in which direction. The thing that is interesting that Mr. Washman discovered in looking at biblical scriptures, this boat required 4 oarsmen. two on each side, with oars that went out and went back and forth. And then in the back here, you had a captain or a helmsman that would move the rudders to guide the ship. The ancient anchors look like this. You find Greek anchors all over the Mediterranean, this type of shape, and you also find them around the Sea of Galilee. These boats would have been used with a seine net, which would have been dragged behind it, not the casting net that was used for the shore. This would have been a casting net, but a seine net would have been a long net, would have had lead bottoms and then cork along the top to keep it afloat. If you look at Mark chapter 1 and you look at verse 16, it says there, and as he, Jesus, walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." They immediately left their nets and followed him. Now in verse 19, we see that when he had gone a little further from there, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, John, his brother, who were also in the boat mending their nets. Immediately he called unto them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants. Now, the servants is plural, so there had to be at least two. So if you look at that, those that are with the boat, you have James and John, Zebedee, and the hired servants. So you had 5 people there. So you would have needed 5 people to man the boat. Now, let's go to John chapter 21. Jesus has told the disciples after he's resurrected from the dead to meet him in Galilee. And while they were waiting there, John chapter 21 and verse 2, Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. And Simon Peter said, "I am going a-fishing." So we see here that there is Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, James and John, and then 2 other disciples. So there's 7 here, but we want to take a note here. And of course, Jesus told them, he calls out from the shore and he says, "Have you caught anything?" And so that's the story where they cast the net out on the side that Jesus tells them on the other side, and then they bring in the large catch of fish. Now, if you go down to verse 8, it says, "But the other disciples came in the little boat." So there's 2 boats at work here, and you have 7 people. So you have Peter, Nathanael, Thomas, and James and John, and then you have 2 other disciples, and they came in the little boat. And little boats would have been used near the shore on the seine net as the larger boat would go out. And you remember that it says Peter was naked, and he jumped back into the sea. Well, the person that would have been pulling on the seine net, on the fishing, the way they did it, would have been in the water to pull that net. And so they would, of course, disrobe, may have had something around the waist, but it brings so much more to the context of the scripture. So when you think about the boat, and when they find something that's dated between 50 BC and 50 AD, and all of the descriptives are perfectly matched, and yet we didn't find the evidence of these things until just recently. Again, it shows the absolute credibility of the Bible. Now, one other thing I want to discuss. I mentioned the ballast bags earlier, and this was one of the things that Shelley Watchman, in his talk that he gave at the lecture at the University of Chicago at the Oriental Institute, he was talking about these ballast bags that they used. And as he was talking to someone, a fisherman, he said that those ballast bags in Aramaic are referred to as pillows. And I had always wondered why it said Jesus was asleep on a pillow. And of course, I think of a Dacron pillow. And I think of, oh, that wouldn't be that nice on a boat because it'd get wet and probably smell bad. But in Aramaic, they would refer to these ballast bags, and these would be needed to make sure that the boat remained stable as they caught in fish and as they went out into the sea. And the other thing is when the sea arose and would toss around, these boats were very unstable and would move back and forth. So you can see why they would have been afraid of sinking. It's estimated that these boats, when they were really pushed, could hold up to 14 to 15 adult males. But that's really pushing the weight limit on these boats. So they're really designed for fishing, and I hope that this has enlightened your biblical knowledge in some way that will help you in your studies. Thank you.